Okay everybody, welcome back. Today on Grit and Gears what we're going to be doing is the big bore kit to the Tomos Lucky 13 build. Okay, in order to do this big bore kit to this engine, it has to be completely disassembled all the way down to the cases. So we're going to start on getting that done. The first thing we want to do is take off the intake. Now you got some Allen keys that are holding this in. Most of this has already been disassembled for rapid response. Once you take the intake off, you'll notice it's got reed valves. A55s have reed valves. Some of the other Tomos engines do not. So we take that off. Next thing we're going to do is take the head off. There are four nuts that hold the head on. These heads have studs on them. Once you take those off, you're also going to want to remove the spark plug, of course, and then you can go ahead and jimmy the head off of the engine. Once you got the head off the engine, then that gives you access to the pistons. So the next thing we do is we're going to want to take this off. We just use a rubber mallet, don't want to use a hammer for anything. We just want to free up the cylinder so that we can work it up and out. And again, that exposes the piston. Once you take this off, you want to kind of hold the piston in place while you're pulling it off like I just did to keep it from slapping up against the cases anywhere. So now we've got that done. Next, you've got Allen bolts all the way around this. This is where your transmission and where your clutch is. So after you get those off, you're going to have to jimmy this a little bit, and then this case cover comes off. Now you've got shims in here, so you want to keep track of those shims and where they go. You're going to have some shims on this one and on this one. So after we do that, the next thing we got to do, which I haven't gotten to yet, but I'm going to get to right now, is we're going to want to take the clutch off. Now, the way I've found to do this the easiest is, and that's the reason I took the head off, is if we got a dowel or something that we can stick in here through the wrist pin of the piston, that'll hold the piston in place and give us purchase to remove this bolt. So let me go ahead and get that done. We'll come back, we'll disassemble the transmission, and we'll move on. Stay tuned. Alright, now that we've got the nut off of here, you'll notice that there is a washer here. Almost looks like a lock washer. This lock washer is actually a lock washer. And we've also got a shim. Okay, there's a shim in here and a lock washer. There's your lock washer. So make sure you keep track of where those are and where they go. And this is your clutches. These clutches are completely smoked. If you notice, the friction material on them is starting to deteriorate and fall off almost completely in some spots. This is going to have to be replaced. Now the amount of power this thing is going to be producing, we can't go back with factory clutches, so I've got a place that I'm going to try out that does a Kevlar lining that's supposed to be 50% more holding power. So we're going to try that out and see how that works for us. Of course, you've got your other clutch pack on the back side here. It takes a snap ring to release that portion to get the back side off. So we're going to send this whole thing out as a unit and get the clutches resurfaced. Alright, next up is going to be this housing right here. We've got to get your gears and your kick shaft. If you notice, there's another shim that just popped off. We've got to keep track of where all these shims go, because they've all have to go back the same place. This right here is your gear set. This is your first gear and your second gear, as well as your kickstart. So all that stuff has to be maintained together. So we're going to keep this all together just like so. We're going to put this shim back on where it belonged, so we keep track of where it goes, and we're going to set it off to the side. I'm going to go ahead and put this shim back on, these two shims back on the front as well, so we can keep track of where they went, as well as the shim that was on the front of this also. This is the best way to go ahead and go about doing this. These two we're going to have to put aside somewhere, but we're going to remember how they go on as well. So we'll stick those over there. Now, next thing is, you've got Allen head bolts in here all over the place that we need to take loose in order to get this case to split apart. But before we do that, we've got to move over to this side and got to remove this stator. This stator has a nut on the inside of here, and we've got to get our puller. So let me go ahead and get geared up for that, and then we'll come back when we've got that done and show you what that looks like. Okay, now we've got the nut off of the stator, and it's a regular righty-tighty, lefty-loosey, counterclockwise to loosen it, clockwise to tighten it. Then you have to have a special, what's called a flywheel puller, which is what I have installed here now, and I'll show you what that looks like after I have it off. And what you'll do is you'll take a crescent wrench and a socket and put it on here like so, and then you tighten it. And it's going to get tight, and then all of a sudden it'll pop. Once it pops, then it's loose. So that's what we got to do now. Right there, you hear the pop? Now it's loose. It doesn't take a whole lot of pressure, but that's what it takes to get it off of there. And then you can pull this off. Now you're going to have a moon key up in here, and it stayed on the flywheel, so that's fine. Let's go ahead and take this off so you can see what this looks like, this puller. Now this is a CDI that's on here. It's not the regular point system, if you notice. This is a CDI that's already on here. Now we're going to upgrade this to a different aftermarket CDI, but this CDI would work to an extent, but then it would run out eventually of spark. But here's what the puller looks like. And what happens is you've got this bolt on the inside. Okay, and this outside this outside part threads to the stator, and then this pushes it off the crankshaft, which pops it loose and allows you to pull everything off. So now that we've got this off, set it aside with the nut. We want to try to keep everything together that we can, so we know how it goes back on again. We're going to pull the stator off, get the wires through here, get the pickup off of here, and then we'll turn it around, take those bolts off, and then we'll be ready to split the cases. So when we get to that point, we'll be right back. Stay tuned. Alright, after we've gotten all the bolts out, we take our rubber mallet and we knock here. There's a lip right here in between where the motor mount bolts in. Tap that lightly with the rubber mallet, tap it at the back with the rubber mallet. And then as you can see, it pulls apart. And retaining clip. It's part of the retaining clip that goes on the front of the clutch. And there's all kind of sludge in here. This is nasty. We've got new seals and new main bearings. The rest of this is going to get replaced. Look at this. This is always what you run across when you buy used engines. This is rust on the crankshaft and on the piston. And because of that, this piston does not want to move at all. This piston's pretty much seized up. You see some bluing right there from getting hot. So this piston and crankshaft are probably no good anymore. They would be alright for some spare parts, but I don't know that I would want to run them in anything. If I had some WD-40 laying around here, I could probably get this to break loose. Pretty well seized in there. Well, next we're going to take the old bearings out, the old seals out, and then I've got to get these hot vatted before we do reassembly and cleaned up. So stay tuned.